My name's David. I'm 46 years old, and I live in Owensboro, Kentucky. Used to think of it as home. Now I think of it as the town where everything fell apart and somehow got rebuilt, just not the way I imagined. I had a wife. Her name was Melissa. We were married for 10 years. 10 years of shared laundry, mortgage payments, cookouts with the neighbors, and what I thought were shared dreams. We met back in college, stayed together through moves and job changes, through her mother's cancer and my layoff from the plant. We were solid. Or at least that's what I believed. But looking back, there were cracks. The kind that don't start as earthquakes, but as hairline fractures in the foundation. Melissa stopped looking at me like I was someone she trusted. I noticed how she laughed at my brother's jokes more than mine. I told myself it was just my imagination. I ignored how she'd linger when Eric was around, how she'd always offer him drinks before asking if I needed anything. I buried it. That's what we do when we don't want the truth to ruin the life we've invested in. We call it loyalty. But sometimes it's just fear dressed up in nicer clothes. Now, Eric, he was always the golden boy, the favorite son, the one who got second and third chances while I had to earn every scrap of approval from our parents. I used to shrug it off. I figured he'd grow out of the charm act. He didn't. He leaned into it. My mom used to say he could sell sand in the desert. Turns out, he could sell a lie too. The bomb dropped on a Monday. A phone buzz. A curiosity. A message not meant for me. And in the span of 30 seconds, I realized my marriage was a lie and the child I'd named and raised might not even be mine. But that's just the start. I wasn't snooping. That's the first thing I want to make clear. Her phone lit up on the kitchen counter while she was upstairs bathing our daughter. Our daughter, I still called her that then. I was cleaning up after dinner, same as I always did, when I saw a notification pop up. It was Eric's name. Nothing unusual about that on the surface. They'd always been close, too close if you asked me. But the preview on that message, it gutted me. Something about her body, about how he missed her. It was intimate in a way you can't misread. I froze. For a second, I genuinely thought it had to be a mistake. Maybe he was texting someone else? Maybe she borrowed a group chat name and it wasn't really him? But no. I opened the phone. No pascode. She must have thought I'd never look. Or maybe she didn't care anymore. The message thread stretched back months. Photos. Plans. Whispered, I miss yous, and he's out of town again confessions. Jokes about how dumb I was. And then one that stopped my breathing cold. She still thinks it's his kid. I read that line 10 times. My legs gave out, and I had to sit. That baby, the one I'd held through sleepless nights and teething and stomach flus, wasn't mine. My mind scrambled for answers. A test? Had I ever done one? No. Why would I? I was there when she was born. I cut the cord. I gave her name. And all this time, they had both been lying to my face. In my home. Using my love like it was some disposable resource. I didn't confront her right away. I wanted to God, I wanted to, but something in me snapped in a quiet, calculated kind of way. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just stood up, walked to my garage, and sat there for hours. I needed to think like a man who'd just been mugged in his own home. Because that's what it was. Not a robbery of things, but of trust, of identity. I started gathering. Not stuff, facts. I took screenshots of every message. Transferred copies to a secure folder. Emailed them to myself under a boring subject line. I looked at dates, timestamps, her travel plans, Eric's visits. It all lined up. The affair didn't just happen during some rocky patch. It was the patch. The whole thing. Their relationship was our marriage's rot. And the baby, my sweet girl. Born 8 months after a girl's trip to Nashville. I remember that trip. I stayed home, painted the nursery, and FaceTimed her while she said the hotel had bad signal. Eric just so happened to be in Nashville that weekend too. A work trip, they said. I'd even covered his flight using my airline points. I was connecting dots that had been in front of me for years. And I realized something far worse than betrayal. I'd been invested in my own humiliation. I had made it easy. I had paid for it. But I wasn't going to keep paying. I waited 2 days before saying anything. 2 whole days of pretending nothing had changed while everything inside me was on fire. I still made her coffee. Still picked up the groceries. Still kissed my daughter goodnight. All while knowing the truth. You'd think that would drive a man insane. And maybe it did in a quiet way. But the thing is, I've been lying to myself for years, so what was 2 more days? On the 3rd morning, I got up earlier than usual. I sat at the kitchen table with a folder in front of me. The one I'd filled with screenshots, copied receipts, calendar events, and one photo that told me more than I ever wanted to know. It was Eric and Melissa in a hotel room mirror selfie. She was wrapped in a towel. He was shirtless, kissing her shoulder, both smiling. My phone screen still had the time and date up top, April 7th. I'd been out of town for a conference I'd paid for out of my own bonus. I didn't tell her I knew. I didn't scream. I handed her the folder as she walked in, groggy-eyed, holding her daughter's sippy cup. She gave me the half-awake smile she used to give me when we were young and in love. I think that's what broke me most, that smile like she still thought she could live this lie and I wouldn't notice. She opened the folder. I watched her face fall in stages. First confusion, then denial, then full-blown panic. Her hands started to shake. She kept flipping pages, maybe hoping for a blank one that would somehow erase everything. When she looked up at me, her mouth opened, but I held up a hand. I didn't need excuses. I didn't want her story. I already knew the ending. I told her I was filing for divorce. She cried. She begged. She swore it wasn't what I thought, that it was complicated, that she still loved me. But the thing is, when someone stabs you with a kitchen knife, it doesn't matter if they loved you when they did it. You're still bleeding. And I had been bleeding for years without even realizing it. I moved out that night, took only what was mine, left the house I had paid for, the furniture I'd assembled, the life I thought we'd built. I slept in my car for 2 days before a buddy from work let me crash on his couch. And even then, I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just felt still, like someone who had finally stopped fighting gravity. The only thing I did cry over? The little girl who called me daddy, who didn't know that everything around her was a lie wrapped in bedtime stories. But I promised myself one thing. If she ever needed me, I'd still show up. Because she didn't ask to be born into this mess. When you get lied to like that, not just by your wife, but by your own flesh and blood, you stop expecting apologies. You stop expecting justice. You just want clarity. I wasn't chasing revenge. I wanted my name back. I wanted my dignity. And I wanted the truth on paper with a judge's seal, so nobody could twist it into something soft and digestible. The DNA test was the first step. I went through a private lab. No lawyers yet, no court orders. Just a swab and a quiet envelope that came 2 weeks later, stamped confidential. I opened it in my truck, parked outside the warehouse where I'd been working overtime to keep my mind off the silence at home. Probability of paternity, 0%. You ever feel your whole chest collapse without making a sound? That's what that paper did to me. Not shock. I'd already known. But confirmation? That'll drive something deep into you. The kind of hurt that doesn't bleed, just sits there like a stone in your gut. She let me name that little girl. Let me be there for every scraped knee, every nightmare, every daddy whispered through tears. And all the while, she knew. They knew. I didn't even go home that night. I drove. Just kept driving past the highway signs and state lines until I ended up at a rest stop in Tennessee, hands gripping the steering like it was the only thing keeping me from disappearing. I slept in the cab, woke up stiff and cold, and made the decision I'd been avoiding for weeks. I was taking them to court, not just for divorce, not just to walk away clean. I wanted to cut the rope entirely. No alimony, no custody entanglement based on a lie, no more playing the part of a man who didn't matter. I wanted out, and I wanted every last scrap of my name back. The hardest part? Telling the court that the child I'd raised wasn't mine. They call it disestablishment of paternity. Sounds clinical, like it should be easy. It's not. It's cold. It's messy. It's admitting that biology can rewrite your whole heart. Melissa tried to fight it, claimed it didn't matter, that I was still emotionally her father, that I had responsibilities, that I loved her once, that I shouldn't walk away. Her lawyer argued I'd acted as a father, and that carried legal weight. But my lawyer came prepared. We brought the DNA, the timeline, the messages, the mirror selfie. And then, twist number 1. Eric tried to show up to the hearing. Sat in the back of the courtroom like some sleazy extra from a courtroom drama, arms crossed like he belonged there. He was smirking, like he thought this would all go in their favor, until the judge looked right at him and asked a single question. Are you prepared to assume paternity and financial responsibility? His smile disappeared. Because Eric, the golden child, the real father, he didn't want her either. You could see the shift happen in real time. 1 second, Eric was leaning back in that courtroom chair like he was invincible, like this whole thing was some boring inconvenience. The next, his face turned that color people get when all the blood rushes down to their feet. Reality had finally caught up with him, and it didn't come with applause. It came with consequences. The judge didn't wait for him to stammer out some half answer. Instead, she turned back to Melissa and asked the only question that mattered. If the man you claimed was the father is not the father, and the man who refuses to take legal responsibility, what exactly do you expect this court to do? Melissa didn't have an answer. Not a real one. Just tears. Always with the tears. When words stop working, People like her fall back on pity. But that courtroom wasn't her living room, and I wasn't the fool I used to be. The judge ruled that I was not financially or legally obligated to the child. She also dismissed the alimony request with prejudice. That's legal talk for don't even try to bring this up again. I walked out of that courthouse a free man on paper, but I'll tell you I didn't feel free. Not yet, because then came the fallout. The phone calls started the next morning. My mother, my father, my sister, every single one of them telling me I was being cruel, that Melissa had made a mistake, and that Eric just got caught up in a confusing situation. Confusing. That's what they called sleeping with my wife and lying about a child for 3 years. My dad had the nerve to say that family sticks together, that I needed to show grace. I told him grace was the thing I'd been showing for a decade while Eric failed upward and I cleaned up his messes. This wasn't grace anymore. This was survival. My mom cried on the phone, begged me to sit down with them just to talk. But I knew what it would be. A carefully orchestrated guilt campaign. One more attempt to fold me back into the old family script. The one where I'm the fixer, the dependable one, the guy who forgives and forgets and funds the cookouts. So I blocked them. All of them. I changed my number, switched to a new email. I even moved apartments closer to my job. My world shrank overnight. And you know what? It felt like breathing for the first time in years. For a little while, things were quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet. The kind of quiet that settles in after an explosion when all the debris is still falling. I buried myself in work. Started picking up more hours, proving to my boss I could lead teams, solve crises, handle clients. It wasn't about the paycheck anymore. It was about building something that nobody could take from me. I was up for a promotion, and for the first time in years, I started to believe I actually deserved it. Then came the letters. First one was handwritten. My mother's script. She said she missed me, that the family wasn't the same without me, that Eric had fallen on hard times and needed my help, that Melissa was struggling to make ends meet, and maybe I could reconsider, just a little support just for the child's sake. As if that child wasn't part of the very lie that burned my life down. I threw it in the trash. The next one came from a lawyer. They were trying to reopen the divorce case. Said I had emotionally adopted the child, and that created an implied legal obligation. They wanted child support. Again, after the judge had already ruled. This wasn't desperation anymore. This was war. But they underestimated one thing. I wasn't the same man they used to manipulate. I'd learned how to fight back. I lawyered up, same firm that handled my disestablishment case. My guy was a beast. Calm, calculated, ruthless in a way that didn't involve yelling, but left no room for mercy. He responded with fire, reminded them of the ruling, presented the DNA test again, and then added something they hadn't expected. A cease and desist order for harassment, and a countersuit for emotional distress and legal fees if they kept pushing. They backed off fast, but that wasn't the final twist. A week later, I got an email from Eric. It was short, just a few lines. Said he lost his job. Said mom and dad couldn't float him anymore. Said he needed help, just a few months until he got back on his feet. That he was sorry for how things went down. I stared at the screen, stunned by the audacity. This was the same man who took my family and laughed in my face, who sat in court smirking while my life unraveled. And now he wanted me to save him? I replied with one sentence. Ask the woman you ruined my life with. Then I blocked that email too. I won't lie. Part of me thought they'd never stop coming. The messages, the guilt trips, the sudden waves of remorse that only ever showed up when their backs were against the wall. But after that last email to Eric, things finally went silent. Really silent. The kind of silence that tells you they've moved on or given up. And maybe, for the first time, I started to move on too. I focused on work like it was a lifeline. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about building something for myself by myself. I started showing up early, staying late, mentoring younger guys on the team like someone once did for me. I gave everything I had to that job, and it paid off. 6 months after the court hearing, my boss called me into his office. He didn't waste time. Said they were promoting me to senior project lead. Bigger office, better pay, more responsibility. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to downplay it like I didn't deserve it. I shook his hand, walked out of that office, and sat in my car, just breathing. Not crying, not overwhelmed, just breathing. Free. I had built something real, and no one could take that from me. That same week, I got a text from my sister. I kept her blocked, but she must have used a new number. It read, heard about the promotion. Glad to see you're doing okay. Mom and dad are struggling. Maybe it's time. Time for what? Time to forgive the people who threw me away like a used napkin when I stopped being useful. Time to pretend like it didn't happen. Time to go back to Thanksgiving dinners, where I'm expected to carve the turkey and smile while everyone else pretends they didn't gut me? No, I didn't even respond. Just blocked the number and went back to my life. That Saturday, I finally did something for myself. I took a drive out to Red River Gorge, rented a small cabin. No service, no distractions, just me, a fire, and the sound of wind through the trees. I sat on the porch that night, whiskey in hand, watching the flames crackle, and I realized something. For the first time in over a decade, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I had both feet on the ground. I wasn't fixing anyone else's mess. I wasn't carrying guilt that didn't belong to me. I wasn't wondering when someone was going to betray me again. I was just me, and that was enough. I was back at work Monday morning, sharper than ever. The team respected me now, not because I barked orders, but because they knew I'd bled for this place. I had earned my place the hard way, not through handouts or family name, but through staying when it was easier to quit. Then the receptionist buzzed me. She said someone was waiting downstairs to see me. No appointment, no name, just said they needed 5 minutes of your time. I thought maybe it was a vendor or someone lost. I told her to send them away. But then she said the name, Melissa. I didn't answer right away. Just stared at the phone, not sure if I was furious, curious, or already exhausted. I told her to send her up. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to see what shame looked like in person. She came in looking like time had worn her down. That self-assured air she used to carry like perfume, gone. Her hands trembled. Her voice, when it came, was thin. Said she wasn't here to ask for anything. Said she knew what she did could never be undone. But she just needed me to know she regretted it. I said nothing. She kept going. Told me Eric had left. That he'd taken what little money she had and vanished. That her parents wouldn't help her. That the girl, the child, was starting to ask questions. That she didn't know what to say. That she was scared. I still didn't say anything. Because none of it, changed what she did. And I didn't owe her the comfort of my reaction. She finally looked up at me and asked something I didn't expect. She asked if I'd tell the girl the truth someday. About not being her father. That cut deep. Because I'd asked myself that same question more nights than I can count. I'd stared at the ceiling wondering if the truth was a wound or a rescue. Wondering if silence was protection or betrayal. Wondering what kind of man I'd be if I told a child, who once fell asleep on my chest, that I wasn't her anything anymore. I told her it wasn't her question to ask, and then I asked her to leave. She didn't argue, just nodded, and before she walked out, she whispered something only I was close enough to hear. Losing you was the real mistake. And for the first time in a long, long time, I realized something. That wasn't my burden anymore. You don't realize how much of yourself you gave away until you start getting it back. Piece by piece, day by day, I started reclaiming the man I was before I let everyone else rewrite my life for me. The version of me that used to second-guess everything, that bent over backward to be the better son, the understanding husband, the quiet supporter. That man died somewhere between the courtroom and the cabin in Red River Gorge. What rose from the ashes wasn't bitter. It was clear, strong, unapologetic. I stopped asking if I was doing the right thing by walking away. Because now I knew I wasn't walking away from a family. I was walking away from a system. One built on guilt, manipulation, and the expectation that I'd keep bleeding just to keep the peace. I didn't owe anyone peace anymore. I started doing small things for myself. Things that sound silly until you remember how long it's been since you did them for joy. I bought a new couch. Painted my apartment navy blue and dark walnut. Took up hiking again. Adopted a rescue dog. A clumsy black lab named Murphy who chews through slippers but curls up by my feet like he's guarding the last good thing on earth. I also started therapy. I thought it was weakness once. But now I see it for what it is, cleaning house. Getting rid of the old furniture in your mind that never belonged to you in the first place. And the biggest change? I stopped waiting for someone to understand me. I stopped looking for closure in people who only showed up when they wanted something. I realized closure doesn't come from apologies that never arrive. It comes from deciding that you're done, that you get to walk out of the burning building and never look back. One morning, I woke up and didn't think about Melissa, or Eric, or even the little girl who used to call me dad. I just thought about what I wanted for breakfast. That might sound small to you, but for me, that was the moment I knew. I had survived.